Hello students, today we are going to cover a very interesting chapter. The name of the chapter is The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle. Now let me tell you, if you are a fan of the stories related to suspense, thriller and detectives, you will definitely like this story. As you might have definitely heard a very famous name of the detective, Sherlock Holmes. Excited, right? Okay. I will tell you the theme of the story now. What can you observe? You can see there is a blue gemstone. That gemstone is called a carbuncle. And that is blue in color, so that is a blue carbuncle. What else can you see? There is a detective, and that is our very own Sherlock Holmes. So let us begin with the chapter and see what's the adventure coming up. Now, before we get into the mystery of the chapter, we should first know whose idea was it? Who created this chapter? Who created the famous character Sherlock Holmes? It was this man, Sir Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle. Let us read about him. Sir Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle was a British writer and a medical doctor. He created the character Sherlock Holmes in 1887 for a study in Scarlet, the first of 4 novels and 56 short stories about Holmes and Dr. Watson, a very famous pair, of all his stories. The Sherlock Holmes stories are generally considered milestones in the field of crime fiction. So if we know Sherlock Holmes, we know him because of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Coming up next is the theme of the story. The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle is one of the 56 short story cases of Sherlock Holmes written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, as we have already discussed. It is the 7th story of 12 in the adventures of Sherlock Holmes. That means there are many other stories related to the adventure of Sherlock Holmes, and this is one of them. The story was first published in the Strand magazine in January 1892. In the story, on Christmas Eve, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson, I told you this is a very famous pair, they try to determine how a fabulous blue carbuncle found its way down the gullet of a goose. Gullet means the esophagus. That is the food pipe of a goose. Now you need to know this, that originally this story has a lot of events. But for your reading purpose, the chapter has been summarized and it has been given in a shortened manner in your course book. Finally, let us move to the chapter and see what's coming up. Now the story begins this way. Watson, that is Dr. John Watson, calls upon Sherlock Holmes in order to wish him a Merry Christmas. That means it is a Christmas Eve, and finds him making an intensive study of a shabby looking hat. That means he is investigating a shabby looking hat. Who? Sherlock Holmes. Holmes tells Watson that a few nights ago the security guard named Peterson had witnessed a gang of roughs assail a man in the street. That means Peterson saw a group of people attacking a man. Peterson rushed forward to help the man, but everyone in the group ran off when they saw Peterson's official uniform. The victim of the attack had dropped his hat and a goose when he ran. Peterson brought the items to Holmes, who suggested that Peterson should take the goose home to eat, whilst he himself retained the hat that was of the man. That means both the hat and the goose belonged to the person who was attacked in the street. So Peterson picked up both and came back to Holmes, gave the hat to Holmes and took home for eating the goose. Now, listening to all this, Watson was a little confused. He was wondering why Holmes is sitting with that shabby hat and trying to investigate that. To that, Holmes told Watson that it was easy to understand much about the owner of the hat by simply studying the features of the hat. This is a little difficult for Watson to understand. He wonders how is it possible to understand about the owner of the hat by simply looking at the hat. So Holmes talks Watson through a series of deductions about the hat's owner. So he starts describing, looking at the hat, how is the owner of the hat. Holmes deduces the owner of the hat through many assumptions. He even deduces that the owner was once a rich man. Suddenly, Peterson rushes into the room and shows a precious stone, which his wife found in the stomach of the goose. Sherlock instantly recognizes the jewel as the Countess of Morcar's blue carbuncle, which had been stolen from her room at the Hotel Cosmopolitan. So looking at this, Sherlock easily understood that it was that very jewel which was stolen from the room of the Countess of Morcar. That means the wife of the Emperor. For that, a plumber had been arrested on suspicion of the theft as he performed a small job in the dressing room on the day of the crime. That means there was a plumber who was working in that room and he was held off doing the robbery. Okay. The complaint was given by an upper attendant, James Ryder. James Ryder gave the evidence that the plumber had stolen the jewel. So now it was very important to find out the owner of the hat, because that person was carrying the goose as well. So Holmes places an advertisement in the newspapers about the hat and consequently receives a visit from Mr. Henry Baker, who hopes to regain his hat and the goose. That means the person who was attacked by the group of people, it was Mr. Henry Baker, and he has come to meet Holmes to get back his goose and the hat. Holmes had a replacement bird ready for Mr. Baker, who shows no sign of wishing to recover the original goose. That means this person is least bothered of checking the goose that it was the original one or not. He is just concerned of getting back the hat and the goose. Realizing that Mr. Baker knows nothing of the jewel theft, Holmes asks where the original bird came from. Mr. Baker informs Holmes that he bought his goose from Mr. Breckenridge. Holmes and Watson dutifully head to the place, that means to Mr. Breckenridge. Reaching there, when Holmes inquires about the geese, Breckenridge becomes angry and refuses to answer any question. Smartly, because Holmes is smart, so smartly he discovers the address of the supplier of the geese. That means who was the supplier? Mr. Oakshott. Now children, you need to understand this, that Mr. Oakshott was the supplier of that goose to Mr. Breckenridge, and Breckenridge was the seller of the goose from whom Mr. Baker had bought the goose. Okay. So now the next challenge of Holmes was to find out Mr. Oakshott. So as Holmes and Watson begin to debate whether to go to see Mr. Oakshott, immediately or the next day, they hear some commotion at Breckenridge stall. That means they hear a noise outside at the stall of Breckenridge. A little nervous man is making what sounds like a repeat enquiry about some geese, and Breckenridge steadfastly refuses to answer. He did the same thing with Holmes and Watson, so now Breckenridge is even not answering anything to this nervous man, who is constantly asking about a goose. And this activity helps Holmes to understand that there is something suspicious about that man, as he is continuously asking for a particular goose. Now next what happens is Holmes and Watson try to catch that person. So see over here it's written, Holmes and Watson overtake the little man as he flees from Breckenridge. That means the man runs from there and they follow him. Holmes indicates that they can help him to trace the goose he is interested in. And hearing this, the man agrees to come and meet at Baker's street with them. They further discover that the man is James Ryder. That means the person who had given the evidence against the plumber who was held responsible for stealing the jewel. Okay, so that was this person only. He was the real thief and he had falsely blamed the plumber. See over here, it's written. They further discover that the man is James Ryder, the Hotel Cosmopolitan attendant who had given evidence of the theft against the accused plumber. Once back at Baker Street, Holmes quickly accuses Ryder of stealing the jewel and framing the plumber. Ryder admits his guilt but begs Holmes to spare him from prison and disgrace. Ryder explains that he had planned the theft. After the arrest of the plumber, he felt it would be the best to hide the stone somewhere away from the hotel. He went to the house of his sister, Mrs. Oakshott, that means the wife of the original seller of the goose, in order to plan everything. And now comes the real plan. See how Ryder plans everything. Ryder's sister had promised him one of her geese for a Christmas present, and he hit upon the idea of force feeding the stone to a goose and then carrying it away with him. Ryder managed to feed the stone to one of the geese, but it escaped from him, and when he came to leave, he picked up the wrong bird. Later, after checking, Ryder raced back and found that the goose was already sold to Mr. Baker. So he tried to recover the goose from him with the help of the hoodlums. That means those rough men who had attacked Mr. Baker. At this point, Ryder bursts into tears and Holmes lets him go. That means Holmes understands that this person had planned out everything, but he had not succeeded in his plan. And anyways, it was Christmas. It was the time of blessings and forgiveness. So Holmes did not want to punish anyone. So he let him go. Holmes points out to Watson that Ryder will not give any evidence against the accused plumber. The justification for this protection of Ryder is that Ryder is too scared of his experiences to ever turn to crime again. That means Holmes is very, very sure that Ryder will not commit any crime ever after. Moreover, he will not be standing as an evidence against the plumber anymore. So the plumber will also be freed. That is the reason Holmes lets Ryder go. And that is how Sherlock Holmes solves one more case.